before we get to what's going on overseas, I want to start here in the U.S. because I know a lot of people here on the set, we're eager to get back to the movie theater, get back to the popcorn, and get back to the experience. I guess the question is, in your estimation and what your folks are seeing on the ground, do you think that you're going to see that type of demand, I guess, in an order of magnitude that would be comparable to what we saw pre-COVID-19?
Not in the short run. It won't be the same order of magnitude. I think it's like a lot of other businesses, like restaurants and bars and beaches initially. I mean, I think people are anxious to get out of the home and to go back to their old way of life. But I think it's going to take some time. And as you said in your intro, we've been open in China for about a month with only classic titles, no new movies. But every weekend has been about double the previous weekend. So the first weekend was around 500,000, and this one is the fourth weekend. It was over $2 million. So it's building back nicely. And I think once people feel safe in the area where they are, and once there are blockbuster movies open, I do think you'll see a big snapback, but I think it's take a little while to get to pre-COVID levels.
Talking about blockbuster movies, everyone's sort of hanging their hat on Tenet, and in particular, this, you say, has been shot using IMAX film cameras. Of course, Christopher Nolan, a big advocate for these sorts of IMAX big theatre experiences. In a way, is this the time for IMAX to dominate? When people are going out less, they probably want to go all out and want a particularly phenomenal experience. Do you think that normal cinemas are going to lose out to us all wanting to stream at home, and then we'll only go out once in a very blue moon?
Well, I think during this opening period, in particular because of Tenet, Chris Nolan and IMAX have a very strong historical relationship, and over time, he's shot a lot of films with IMAX cameras in a masterful way, and our percentage of the box office is very high. So for Dunkirk, his last movie, we did 22% of his box office in only about 1% of the screens. So I think it's a great way for us to be reopening, because I think people associate Chris with IMAX and IMAX with Chris, and that's going to be some momentum. On the other side, I think there's the blockbuster nature of it. I think people naturally want to see blockbusters in the theaters and not at home. And the one or two movies that did move to PVOD were the exception, and almost every other movie that moved this year, whether it was Top Gun or whether it was Fast and Furious or whether it was Spider-Woman, every one of those movies moved to a theatrical release. So I think people want to see them at the movies. I think streaming is a little bit, there was no movie narrative now. So it was people looking for stories. That became the narrative, and the movies couldn't really answer because they weren't open. But I think you're going to have good answers. And in Korea, for example, which has been open for a while, they released a blockbuster in Korea, and it did $20 million on opening weekend, which is one of the biggest in Korean history. And you have to remember, there are capacity limits and there are limited show times. So the territories where it's open, people have gone back to the movies in surprisingly strong numbers. And when they've gone back, they've seeked out the IMAX experience because I think they trust brands and they want to see it in IMAX.
You mentioned capacity. I'm curious, long term, what is sustainable for you, not only to break even, but to actually return to profitability?
So the answer is a little bit surprising because we've all heard in the restaurant business, they can't make money at 50% capacity. And in the movie business, if a chain does 20% a year or 25% capacity, that's a phenomenally successful year. Last year IMAX had a record box office, and our capacity was just north of 10%. The hook in it is that a lot of that capacity comes on Friday nights and Saturday nights. So the theaters are built for peak periods. And the question is, will people spread out more evenly during the week? Our early experience in other territories suggests, yes, they will, because a lot of them aren't back at work, and a lot of them will want to go at times they perceive to be less crowded. But the capacity number in itself isn't an issue. It's how spread out people will be.
Rich, one last quick question here about the supply of movies out there. Because of the pandemic, we did see a lot of productions effectively shut down completely for several months. And there is some concern here that once you get theaters and everything else back up and running, it's going to take a while for Hollywood to really start churning out all of those movies to the level that they had prior to that. Is there any concern here that the lag time between opening these theaters and getting new movies out there might be a little bit big?
I think in the short run, there might be a little concern in North America where some movies move to next year. In the longer term, the fact that movies move to next year means that there's a whole bunch of blockbusters that are ready to go for next year. So for the rest of this year, you still have some important ones, including Black Widow and including the new Bond movie and Wonder Woman and a number of other things. But for next year, you have completed films like Top Gun, like Fast and Furious, and then production has started to resume in a lot of countries, including in England, and you have Jurassic World is back in production again. So I think next year it's not going to be a problem. It could be a little bit of an issue over the next couple months.